That summer, when I was 12, we found a sun-bleached boat behind Aunt Mabel's boathouse and carried it to the edge of the lake as if bearing a secret. The air smelled of pine needles and tar, of sun-warmed wood and the faint sour sweet of crushed wild berries from the hedgerows. The boat creaked as we slid it down the muddy slope, and a cloud of dragonflies rose in a silent, interrupted chorus. My cousin Eli screwed up his face, half smile, half fear, as if the thing we coveted could swallow us whole if we laughed too loud. We were a small troop of summer, the days banded together by the long afternoons and the promise of water. The lake wore the colour of a patient, tired eye, blue-grey and forgiving, and on its surface light trembled like a memory trying to reassemble itself. We pushed off, and the boat took the water with a polite sigh, as if acknowledging a debt owed to each of us. The first splash of cold made me gasp, the chill stealing the heat from my arms and turning it into a bright, awake ache. On the bench seat, the varnish tasted of years and salt, and every plank carried a story, slivers of old conversations, the muffled clink of coins saved for ice cream, the occasional sting of a splinter that made you swear aloud and then smile about it later. We yoded in tandem, not perfectly, but with a stubborn, hopeful rhythm. A shared heartbeat that rose and fell with the boat's quiet rocking. The water reflected the sky back at us, a pale, patient glare that seemed to measure us and not judge. We learned to listen to what the lake wasn't saying, the soft whisper of the reeds along the bank, the distant laughter of adults where a barbecue smoke wilted into the heat, the way the shore blurred and reformed as we moved. We didn't worry about framing the moment, about who would remember it as important. We simply believed we could stay afloat forever if we kept our hands ghost-soft on the oars and our feet tucked in the draft of the boat's memory. The sun drifted down in a slow, unhurried arc, and with it a pattern emerged. Eli would steer a touch wide to avoid a jut of watergrass. I would lean in, listening for the tiny report of a fish against the hull. And Jonas, our oldest, a quiet boy with a habit of watching the world through a lens of seriousness, would offer a joke at the exact moment the heat pressed closest, which would pull a laugh from us like a release. That week held a ritual without ceremony. Breakfast smelled of bread and honey, and the suggestion of tea kept warm on a stove that hummed with afternoon fatigue. We would check the boat for scrapes, sweep away the dust of the rushes, and then push off again into the light that had become a map we followed without question. In the afternoons, we drifted to a cove where the water darkened to nearly black, beyond which the lake seemed to dream in slow motion. We swore we heard music there, perhaps the river turning somewhere far away, perhaps the soft pulse of the earth beneath, while dragonflies stitched lines in the air above the water, and dropped away as if frightened by something we could not see. I remember the moment when the world pressed gently, almost tenderly, on the edges of our childhood. A storm had gathered and then moved off into the hills, leaving the air damp and cool, the scent of rain on dust still clinging to the hedges. The boat drifted to a standstill in a shallow eddy, and we lay there listening to the hush after the thunder, distant, unhurried, like the weight of a chorus shelving its voices. The sky wore the pale bruise of late afternoon, and the lake reflected it back as if to say, "Here is your quiet." We did not feel small or frightened in that moment, only connected, like the river to its banks, like a chorus to its harmony. That week, we learned to share more than space or air. We learned that to belong to one another, you must also learn to let go. The small humiliations of childhood, fumbled catches, a misplaced oar, a whispered contest to see who could stay silent the longest, dissolved into something sturdier, a pact to protect one another's courage, even when it trembled. When someone fell asleep on the boat's edge, chin resting on a forearm, we did not laugh at the drifting head, but kept the boat steady, as if the sleep itself deserved a harbour. When a squall came not from the sky, but from the fear of missing the moment, we took it in and laughed after, a little shakily, the way you laugh when a friend's hand holds yours through something you didn't expect. Looking back, I see how that week stitched itself into the fabric of who I became. Those days taught me to trust the patient work of small things, the pluck of a rope, the careful way water finds its own level, the quiet authority of someone who knows how to wait for the right wind. We learn to be brave not by grand gestures, but by the stubborn, repetitive care of ordinary acts. To wipe a muddy knee, to share a crust of bread, to say your name aloud at the moment you must become someone else for the sake of the crowd you love. If there is a thread running through my life, it is that thread, thin as a fishing line, strong as a vow, that says you will not do this alone. You will be helped, you will help, you will remember. Time hardened the edges of that memory in the years that followed, not by sharpening pain, but by giving it context. The lake grew distant in winter, and the boat retired to its old place under the eaves of memory, where it waited with a neat, almost ceremonial patience for the next warm breath of spring. My own children came with their own boats and their own ways of listening to water, and I learned again with them what I had learned with my cousins. How to hold a moment gently, how to keep a promise with a mere gesture, an eye's quiet nod, a shared mug of tea, a long breath before a laugh that loosens the day's knots. In old age, the lake calls to me still, not in the sharp way of youth, but with the softened timbre of a long lullaby. I can hear the boat's sigh as it slides across the surface of memory, the way the oars dip and rise with a patient rhythm I recognize as my own. The heat that once burned into my skin now rests in the soft, sure ache of age, and I am grateful for every year that memory has weathered, for it has taught me to measure time not in numbers, but in the weight of a shared moment. What remains is not a hero's conquest, but a quiet economy of grace. The way a day can hold 1,000 small furnaces of joy that burn without demand. The way a room can hold the sound of a child's voice long after the voices have grown quiet. The way a lake can be both a mirror and a door. I am older now, perhaps thinner in the body, but fuller in the ways a life can fill a room with quiet testimony. I carry that summer inside me, its heat, its breath, its unspoken vow to return, like a letter kept safe in a kept place, to be opened when the night grows long and the world feels too loud. If I am asked what that week gave me, I would tell the truth I learned on the water, that belonging is a form of bravery, that belonging survives the season's end and lingers in the shape of what we do for one another when the day is done. The boat may rest again, the river may run its slow course, and the hills may harden with frost, but the memory holds a steady flame, the knowledge that even in the quiet, a life can be gathered and kept, and that gratitude is the most faithful companion one can carry across the years. And so I float through the present with the same careful pace, listening for the small, almost sighing sound of the water each time I press a window open on a summer day. The past arrives not as a shout, but as a gentle, persistent friend who sits beside me, reminding me how I learned to breathe in the presence of others, and to breathe out when it became time to let them go. Time moves, yes, but meaning, the meaning born of shared breath and a boat that allowed us to dream, remains. And for that I am endlessly grateful.